Hey, welcome back and thanks for joining me for another episode in my TIE Fighter model build series. In fact, this will be the last episode of the series. So I'm just going to get in here and we've got the bottom of the TIE Fighter here and I need to secure it to my brass tubing so that I can mount it to my base and hold it up. So I need to drill out the center of my bottom plate here, and I'm just going to start out with some small bits and work my way up rather than just start hauling in there with the big bit. I find it's easier just to start out smaller and get larger. And I just work my way up until I get up to the correct diameter that I need for my tubing, which I've also threaded, as you can see here. And the hole is slightly smaller so that I can kind of push and thread my tubing into the plate rather than having to glue it in place. And I've got it in here now, and you can see it's nice and secure, and there's a hole there for all my wires to go through. So now I've cut my tubing down to the proper length that I'd like for my base to hold the TIE Fighter up, to be an inch or two up in the air. And on my base here, I'm going to have to drill a hole for the tubing to go through. But first, I've primed and painted my tubing black, which is the color that I want to use to hold it up in the air. So I've got my hole drilled here in my base, as you can see right here. So the next thing I need to do is I have my trinket, my soundboard, my power board, my switches, my power button, and my speaker. And I'm putting them inside the base here in the proper placement where I would like to put them. My switches up there to push for the lasers and all that. So I've gone through and I've put standoffs on my boards here, and I've also cut out all the holes in my base, as you can see here. Now if you want more detail on this, you can look at my X-Wing model build where I did this and showed a little more detail of how I did it, but for now I've already gone through and done it, and this is where all of my boards are going to sit inside of my base here. So I've gone and painted my base black, as you can see, and I've also, around the bottom edge, I've notched out, as you can see right here, on all four sides to let the sound come out from my speaker that I'm going to mount, so it's a little easier to hear. So I'm just going to start out with my standoffs on my soundboard here, and I'm going to hot glue it into position. So I'm just going to take some hot glue, put it on my standoffs, and then I'm just going to push the board into place and let the glue do its thing. And then I'm going to move on to my trinket, which is basically my Arduino control. And I've got all of my boards hot glued into place now, as you can see right here. Even my USB power plug, and you can see how the USB fits snug into all of my boards, and they're nice and secure, they don't move or anything. And then my buttons here, they work just fine, and that's for my laser fire and sound effects. So I'm just going to start out by wiring up and soldering all of the ground leads that I need for my boards, starting off with my trinket ground lead to the ground of my USB power board, and then moving on to the ground for my sound effects board, which I'm doing right here. And then I'm going to do some ground leads over to my activation switches for the lasers and sound effects. So I've got all my ground wires run that I need, as you can see right here. So then I'm going to move on to the power leads and hooking up, wires to my switch here, so that when I push the switch, it'll send the power over to my trinket and sound effects board. So now I'm just wiring up the positive lead for my trinket. And those are nice and secure. The power switch is secure, and that'll activate it. Then I'm going to run a power lead from my switch once again over to my sound effects board so that it'll get its power when the button is activated. So I've got those power leads all wired up to turn everything on. Now I'm soldering up my pin out on my trinket that will go to the laser button here, so that when the button is pushed it will activate the laser fire on the trinket, and then another lead going over to the sound effects board to activate the sound. And I've also got my other lead run to the sound effects board just for purely sound effects. Then I've got my speaker here, which I'm going to wire up to my sound effects board, doing the negative and positive leads of my speaker wires here. Get them all soldered into place. And there we go. And I've got this Coca-Cola cap that I drilled a bunch of holes out in to make a speaker box to house my speaker, and notched a little area here for my wires. So I'm just going to peel off this little self-adhesive piece here on the speaker, and I'm just going to stick my speaker right inside the bottle cap here, and the adhesive will hold it in place inside my speaker. And then it's going to go right in this position here. So I'm just going to take some hot glue, and I'm just going to glue the bottle cap right to the bottom of the base to make my speaker box for my sound effects. So now we got everything all wired up inside my base, and I just need to put my tubing through the hole here. So I've cut a little notch in the bottom of my tube, as you can see, for the wires to come through to go to the boards. And I'm just going to carefully push this tubing into my base. And now we've got that mounted and secured. And it's flush with the bottom of the base, but again I've got my notch here so that my wires can come out and go to the boards. And one final touch for my base, I picked up this Imperial vinyl car sticker from eBay, and I'm just going to stick this on the base here so that it'll match my X-Wing fighter that I did, where I have the Revell insignia on its base. And there we go, we've got the Imperial insignia on my TIE Fighter base. So I've got all my wires here coming out the bottom of my TIE Fighter model, and I'm just going to start feeding them through my brass tubing here and pull them out the other end. Alright, and now I've got all my wires coming through the bottom of my tubing. And then I need to put a little glue around the edges of the bottom here of my TIE Fighter to glue it into position. So I'm just going to use my glue applicator and go around some points and then push the bottom onto the model and seal it up. And here we have it closed up and sealed. So I've gone and soldered up my wires from the model. I've done my grounds to the ground of the power board. Some of the grounds I've mounted to the ground of the sound effects board. I've wired up my positive leads for the cockpit and engines to my switch here, and the positive leads of the laser fire to my trinket. So at this point everything is wired up, everything is working, the model is mounted, and I'm happy with how it's turned out. So you'll have to stay tuned for the next episode to see my final reveal. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you like watching my videos, please feel free to give them a like. And so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, click subscribe.